Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Meeting you again, my dear students. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Uh, this time we are going to talk about nutrition. Nutrition in the sense that building the food or producing the food by micro and macroorganisms. And we are still in LU2, biochemistry, cell structure and function. I guess this topic is quite light for all of you. You may want to read on your own, but we will go through the lecture in a very simple and straightforward lesson. Under this topic, nutrition in organism, we have only one learning objective where at the end of the day, the students should be able to describe the nutritional types in living organism. When we talk about living organism, they include macroorganism and microorganism. Macroorganism is a complex organism. They are eukaryotic, and for microorganism, they are less complex organism, and they are prokaryotic. According to Oxford Dictionary of Biology, they define nutrition as the process by which organism, regardless of any level or types of organism, who obtain energy in the form of food for growth, maintenance, and repair. So I suppose the nutrition that we will talk about in this lecture are mainly for growth, maintenance, and repair. And they will help in organisms' metabolism as well as for their developmental process. Other than that, nutrition in organisms are a process in producing or obtaining food can be also defined as the process by which organism obtain the nutrients which contain energy, source of carbon, and other sustenance from their environment. In this aspect, we are talking about the surrounding of the organism or the surrounding of the organism's habitat where they normally live a life and producing the food for their life cycle as well as for their development. Other than that, nutrition in organisms also are known as a building organic molecules of cell and carrying metabolic activities. As I mentioned before, as I mentioned earlier, this kind of nutrition or producing or obtaining food is mainly for building the organic molecule for their cell, and this building is for the purpose of metabolic processes or metabolic activities, especially for their development. Regardless of any types of organism, whether they are prokaryotic or eukaryotic, organisms have two fundamental nutritional needs. Once again, two fundamental nutritional needs. The first one is acquiring chemical energy in the form of ATP. Yes, organisms whether they are prokaryote or eukaryote, they need energy in the form of ATP for the process of producing the food, for the process of obtaining the food within the cell. Second needs, obtaining molecule with carbon-carbon bond that can be used as building block for the synthesis of fatty acid, protein, DNA, RNA, and other large complex compounds required by the cell. Actually, before they get these molecule with carbon-carbon bond, all of these obtaining of carbon-carbon bond molecule as a prerequisite, they need chemical energy in the form of ATP because it may act as a kickstart to do or to execute the other process of building the bigger blocks or building the polymer of the cell by having energy in the form of ATP. Then only it comes the synthesis of fatty acid, the synthesis of protein from amino acid, the synthesis of RNA, and other large complex macro and micromolecule which require for the cell for metabolic processes. In nutrition, there are modes of nutrition where we can classify into energy source and also a carbon source. In energy source, we can see they came from light source or chemical source. The carbon source may come from organic compound and also carbon dioxide. And the correlation between the carbon source of carbon dioxide and energy source of light, we can see there is a photoautotroph type of nutrition. Meanwhile, the correlation between a chemical energy source and also carbon source of carbon dioxide, here they come a chemoautotroph modes of nutrition. What about photoheterotroph and chemoheterotroph? Photoheterotroph, they fall under the energy source of light and carbon source of organic compound. Meanwhile, the chemoheterotroph, they fall on the chemical energy source and also carbon source of organic compound. So basically, when we see the word chemoautotroph or chemoheterotroph, they must be under the group of chemical energy source. And when we see the photoautotroph and photoheterotroph, they must be under the umbrella of light energy source. Now let's look at what is photoautotroph and photoheterotroph. In details, photoautotroph, known as photosynthesizers that use energy from light to drive the synthesis of organic or carbon compounds and ATP from carbon dioxide and water. This mode of nutrition include photosynthetic prokaryotes, for example, cyanobacteria, plants, and certain types of protists, such as algae. This is very obvious. This type of organism, they are prokaryotes and they are photosynthetic types of organism. They can do their work, they can produce their food on their own by having light to drive the synthesis of organic and carbon compound and ATP from CO2 and water as in the form of electron energy. Now, photoheterotroph, they harness energy or they absorb or they get energy from light to generate ATP and obtains organic compounds from other organisms. These include certain prokaryotes such as Rhodobacter and Chloroflexus. This type of bacteria I've shared with you in this slide on the bottom right of the slide. Where this type of bacteria, they are known to be photoheterotroph. They can actually produce their own food by harvesting or collecting the light energy to generate ATP, but they obtain organic compound from other organisms. In comparison to photoheterotroph, they can manufacture the total food by their own. Meanwhile, for chemoautotroph and also chemoheterotroph, they can be defined as chemoautotroph. They use energy from chemical reaction to generate ATP and produce organic compound from inorganic substances. This type of mode of nutrition, for example, conducted by a certain types of prokaryotes such as sulfolobus. What about chemoheterotroph? This type of organism, they use energy from chemical reaction to generate ATP and produce organic compound from other organisms. In comparison to chemoautotroph produce organic compound from inorganic substances. Meanwhile, chemoheterotroph produce organic compound from other organisms. Example of organisms under the groups of chemoheterotroph, they can be any types of prokaryote such as Clostridium. There are some protists, fungi, or even animal and some plant are classified doing this type of mode nutrition, chemoheterotroph. So basically, the overall features of nutrition type in organism can be classified and characterized into the following diagram. So what we can see here, there are two major classes of nutrition type, which is autotrophic and heterotrophic. Under autotrophic, they are further divided into two, which is photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. Definitely, photosynthesis requires energy in the form of light. Chemosynthesis requires energy in the form of the chemical compound. For heterotrophic, they are further divided into holozoic, saprotrophic, and also symbiotic. And for symbiotic, they will be further divided into mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. Okay, now the autotrophic nutrition. Organisms, they will synthesize the organic compounds they require from inorganic sources. Normally, the primary sources of carbon and nitrogens they need or they get in order to synthesize the organic compounds came from carbon dioxide and also nitrate. All green plants, they are known to be autotroph. They use light as a source of energy to perform photosynthesis. They are also known as photoautotrophic. A very clear-cut and direct information. This is the information that I would like to share. There are some bacteria outside there known to be photoautotrophic, meaning that they have ability and capacity to produce their own food. Other bacteria, most of them, they use energy derived from chemical processes known to be a chemosynthesis. Example of a bacteria which was classified or known to be under chemosynthesis, such as Nitrosomonas and Thiobacillus. A bacteria of Nitrosomonas, they oxidize ammonium to produce nitrate. Meanwhile, for Thiobacillus, they normally oxidize sulfur to produce sulfate. So this kind of bacteria known to produce their own food, but by having a chemical energy and then transforming the initial energy into a useful compound that they can use to derive or to synthesize the, the nutrient or the carbon for their life. And chemosynthesis also can be defined as a type of autotrophic nutrition in which organism, where we will call them chemoautotroph, synthesize organic materials using energy derived from the oxidation of inorganic chemical rather than from the sunlight. This is a very clear-cut information since we know the word chemosynthesis. Chemo is chemical, synthesis is producing, meaning that this kind of bacteria or any organism or any microorganism which classify under this group, they can produce the food. However, they need to synthesize any organic material by using energy which derive from oxidation of inorganic chemical, not the sunlight, for photoautotroph. And I've mentioned to you what is a photoautotroph as well as chemoautotroph, or photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. Specifically for chemosynthesis, the energy to drive the synthesis of organic compound is obtained by oxidizing inorganic chemicals such as sulfur, iron, ammonium, nitrate, hydrogen, or even hydrogen sulfide. This oxidizing inorganic molecule with high potential energy such as ammonium or methane. And to be known as chemoautotroph, these type of bacteria, they actually play a very significant and a good role in biogeochemical cycle. We have heard about nitrogen cycle and also carbon cycle. All of these cycles are very useful and relevant in agriculture as well as in plantation area. This is because this type of bacteria are used to do the cycle of oxidizing inorganic molecule with high potential energy in producing the organic compound. And this organic compound may be used for the plant or other types of organism for the purpose of producing the food.